He was the voice that turned silence into music and then became silence himself. When news broke that Michael Eugene Archer, known to the world as D'Angelo, had passed away on October 14, 2025, at the age of 51, the music world didn't just lose a legend. It lost the man who made mystery his greatest masterpiece. The statement from his family was brief, dignified, and heartbreakingly quiet. A long and courageous battle with cancer. No details. No spectacle. Just privacy, the one thing he'd been asking for his entire life. But in today's world, even death doesn't buy peace. Within hours, gossip sites were already running headlines, naming the illness, posting speculative photos, digging into medical records that should have remained untouched. It was almost poetic in its cruelty. The man who fought so hard to protect his art, his mind, and his soul from public intrusion lost control of his story at the very end. But to understand that irony, to understand why D'Angelo became both a ghost and a god in modern music, you have to go back. Before Brown Sugar, before Voodoo, before the cameras ever found him, D'Angelo's story didn't start in fame. It started in faith. Born in Richmond, Virginia in 1974, he grew up in a house where Sunday mornings weren't optional. His father was a Pentecostal preacher, his mother a choir singer. And somewhere between the sermons and the harmonies, little Michael found his calling. He taught himself piano by ear. By 12, he was composing songs that felt older than he was full of pain, longing, and soul. He once said church gave him rhythm, but the streets gave him truth. That blend became his signature. Sacred but streetwise, timeless yet new. At 19, he caught the attention of EMI Records executives. They weren't just impressed, they were stunned. He didn't sound like anyone on the radio. He sounded like someone from another era, dragged into the 90s with nothing but a Fender Rhodes and conviction. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing freedom. Then came Brown Sugar 1995. The album that didn't just sell, it rewired the DNA of modern soul music. It fused the rawness of Marvin Gaye with the groove of Funkadelic and the vulnerability of Prince. It didn't shout. It whispered, and the world leaned in to listen. The record went platinum. Critics crowned him the new face of R&B, and overnight, D'Angelo found himself standing at the front of a movement he never asked to lead. They called it neo-soul, and he was its architect. Artists like Erykah Badu, Maxwell, Jill Scott, and Lauryn Hill followed, building on the sound he'd pioneered. But to D'Angelo, it was never a scene, it was a heartbeat. He wanted people to feel the imperfections, the breath between the notes. But the more perfect the world wanted him to be, the less comfortable he became. Still, Brown Sugar made him a star, and the industry wanted more louder, sexier, faster. But D'Angelo wasn't built for speed, he was built for depth. Then came Voodoo, the album that would both crown and curse him. Released in 2000, Voodoo wasn't just music, it was possession. A dark, pulsing, living thing. It won 2 Grammys, critics hailed it as genius, and D'Angelo seemed to have transcended every limit. But then came that video Untitled, How Does It Feel? Just him, shirtless, vulnerable, intense. It was meant to be art, a minimalist visual companion to a song about intimacy and truth. But the public saw something else, a sex symbol. Almost overnight, the man who spent his life crafting music that spoke to the soul became trapped in an image that only spoke to the body. Fans screamed, media drooled, concerts turned chaotic, women shouted things that weren't about his lyrics. And D'Angelo, the perfectionist, the quiet craftsman, started to crumble. In later interviews, friends said he began to withdraw, refusing interviews, skipping photo shoots, even canceling tours. He didn't want to be idolized. He wanted to be understood. And so he disappeared. 14 years of silence. In that void, myths grew. Some said he'd lost himself to addiction. Others claimed he was living in isolation, recording secret projects in his home studio. But the truth, according to those closest to him, was simpler and sadder. He was searching for peace in a world that kept trying to sell his pain. The Genius Recluse label stuck, but it was more survival than mystique. When he finally returned in 2014 with Black Messiah, it wasn't a comeback, it was an exhale. The album dropped out of nowhere at a time when America was burning. The Ferguson protests, the death of Eric Garner, the air felt thick with anger and exhaustion. Black Messiah arrived like prophecy. It was political, spiritual, and unapologetically black. A declaration of identity, resistance, and faith. Tracks like The Charade and 1,000 Deaths hit like sermons. For many fans, D'Angelo had returned not as a celebrity, but as a messenger. In a world that prized constant visibility, he reminded everyone that silence could still be sacred. Over 30 years, D'Angelo released only 3 studio albums: Brown Sugar, Voodoo, and Black Messiah. Just 3, and yet every single one is considered a classic. All 3 made Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. It's rare, almost unheard of, for an artist to vanish for more than a decade and return with work that feels timeless. But that's who he was. He didn't chase relevance. He chased resonance, and maybe that's why his death hit so hard. Not just because he was gone, but because we never got enough of him while he was here. The pain of his passing deepened when fans realized something haunting. He died just 7 months after Angie Stone, his former partner, collaborator, and one of the founding mothers of neo-soul. They weren't just connected by music. They were connected by life. Angie co-wrote several songs on Brown Sugar, helped shape his earliest sound, and shared with him a son, Michael Jr., who now performs under the name Swayo Twain. In less than a year, that son lost both parents, 2 pillars of the same musical movement, both taken by illness. The internet buzzed with tributes, but behind every trending hashtag was a young man mourning not icons, but his mother and father. It was a reminder that legends are still people. That behind every timeless track, there's a heartbeat that eventually stops. But even in the quiet after his death, D'Angelo's name still echoes. Because before he got too sick to record, reports suggest he had 6 unreleased projects in the works. The detail came from fellow artist and longtime friend Raphael Saadiq, who hinted that the music was nearly ready before D'Angelo's health declined. 6 projects. 6 unheard stories. And fans can't stop wondering, will they ever see the light? His label has remained silent. His estate hasn't commented, but sources close to the family say his private vaults hold hundreds of hours of material demos, collaborations, instrumentals, and full songs that may redefine his legacy once again. And maybe that's fitting. Because D'Angelo always communicated best through mystery. Every silence was intentional. Every absence, a statement. So perhaps this isn't the end of the story. Maybe his quiet wasn't final. Maybe it was his final verse still waiting for the world to listen. When the lights fade and the music stops, most artists are remembered for what they gave us. But D'Angelo will also be remembered for what he withheld. He taught an entire generation that restraint could be revolutionary, that privacy could be power, and that true soul can't be manufactured, only lived. From Brown Sugar's smooth defiance, to Voodoo's chaotic brilliance, to Black Messiah's political pulse, his art was never about fame. It was about freedom, and now, in the silence that follows, maybe that's what he finally has.